Yes, ma'am, we can start now.
Okay.
Day 6 already.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Arindam Bose once again to this lecture series. This is his second lecture. So I'll introduce him briefly. He's an associate professor at the Center for Excellence in Teacher Education, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and also a collaborative professor at the Federal University for Sao Paulo, Brazil. Dr. Bose was the Vice President, International Committee of the International Group of Psychology of Mathematics Education, 21 to 23, and a member of the International Committee Mathematics Education and Society. Of course, he's attached to various curriculum groups and policy. His primary work is in the area of, he's a mathematician. Unlike me, I'm a psychologist working on mathematical thinking. Dr. Bose is trained in mathematics and is looking at the psychology of mathematics. So I welcome Dr. Bose to this lecture series, and over to you, Dr. Bose.
Thank you, Dr. Panda. This is really an honor to be able to speak with the colleagues coming from various backgrounds. Yes, my basic training has been in mathematics, but I think now I take pride in calling myself a social scientist because I now prefer working in the domains of areas of cognitive science, culture and cognition, and areas which have an impact on basic mathematics learning, particularly in the out of school contexts. So this talk is also about one such example coming from out of school experience that most of us have. So when you see the examples or the ideas given in the presentation, I'm sure many of you will find them very connected. You will find yourself connected with these ideas. One of the things which we will try to do today is to theorize, some of these examples and see if we are able to connect it with some of the available theories and also take these ideas forward. Because some of these examples are so common and so present in our everyday settings, we often tend to not see them, or even if we are seeing them, we are not really recognizing that there is something very special happening around us. So here is the topic where I'm trying to give you only a basic, some of the glimpses of how measurement knowledge in out of school context are and what implications can we have for school mathematics learning, especially. So I move to the next slide. Varsha, are you able to see the second slide?
Uh, so you have to move this now.
Now you see. Okay.
No.
So here is what I have planned for the talk. Let's see how it proceeds. One of the platforms which
Arindam,
NMRC, yeah,
it's not stable. It's going back and forth between first. Now the second is on. Yeah, it's stable now. Yeah.
Now it's
okay. Okay, so one of the platforms which NMRC provides is a dialogue. So I will try to give examples and cover as much as possible, but I know it's also a very tall task to be able to cover all these which I have planned. So I will try to first of all come up with the idea of out of school measurement knowledge and the importance of it being discussed. Why should we even talk about it? And then connect it with some of the theories. And one such theory that I use is funds of knowledge, in an anthropological idea to explain these resources. Then I will try to connect it with some of the previous research as are available, where instances of after school measurement knowledge will be showcased. And then I will try to introduce an idea which I've been working with along with my guru, my PhD mentor, Professor Ravi Subramaniam. And we have been thinking about this idea of archaeology, basically unpacking, digging, and seeing how measurement knowledge could be embedded in community practices, and also how these could be used or have been used in old textbooks and so on. And then finally, we will try to see some possible connections. Now I'm on the third slide. Is it visible? Yeah. Okay. So the question is, why do we even need to talk about it? About out of school measurement knowledge in particular. It's because, as I argue here, measurement is everywhere. It's almost ubiquitous with our everyday life experiences. And these ideas, measurement related ideas, occur in different ways. They could occur in our workplaces, in our work contexts, in our cultural practices within community practices, or even in the economic transactions, daily, everyday routine transactions, and also at daily chores at homes. And then measurement knowledge helps us to connect mathematical objects with empirical reality. And that is one of the objectives of actually introducing measurements at the middle grade. It's one of the process of mathematization, which is often one of the larger objectives of teaching mathematics at the school level. And measurement gives you one such tool to do that. Also, in the everyday context and in community level practices, measurement related ideas often remain unclear, sedimented, embedded. And they are not really visible unless you make them visible. All right. And then these appear in various forms with diverse measurement modes and units, which actually are very, very interesting to anyone who is interested in the connection between mathematics and culture, and how do people mathematize, or how do we cognize mathematically coming from a cultural perspective. This is a very interesting topic for them. In addition, of course, this is interesting for from a school perspective as well, the school syllabi perspective as well. I'm sorry. Now, out of school knowledge is what? What is it that we talk about and claim to be as out of school? Look, this has been in research domain for the past, I can safely say now, more than 40 years, 45 years, probably more. And people like Teresina Nunes, Lauren Resnick, in some extent Ubidatnan Ambrosio, they Geoffrey Sachs, Jerry Lipka, they try to depict and document how children think and what do they think when they are actually encountering mathematical problems in their daily work settings. And many of these people actually worked with street vendors. Professor Panda actually knows some of them who worked in this domain. Teresina Nunes, for example, is is well known to our group, and she was one of the pioneers who worked in this area called street mathematics. Although different people have given different names, there are words like everyday mathematics, out of school mathematics, street mathematics have been used. I prefer to call it out of school knowledge because that then gives you a wider canvas, and then that is better. I mean, for me, I mean, I try to use it in a wider sense so as to include other cultural perspectives as well. Now, one of the ideas and theories with which curriculum developers work in the post-Piagetian perspective is to see a child coming to the classroom not as a tabula rasa, not as a blank slate, and then imagining that the child herself has enough prior knowledge drawing from her environment and experiences in connection with community members and elders in the family and so on. So this interconnectedness, interpersonal activities help her to create scheme of things already, even
Arindam
when
sir,
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the slides are not stable. They are moving back and forth to slides.
really. Then, Varsha, can you share the slides? I will stop sharing. I think that will
Okay,
be better.
okay, sir. Yeah, okay, sir.
All right, let me continue. So, what I was saying is, let Varsha start presenting. I'll continue. So, what I was saying is, uh, with this idea, the child is coming to the classroom with a lot of prior knowledge, cultural experiences, and so on. That is one aspect. And the second is, often in developing world context such as ours, and in low income settlements, we often see children having exposure to community practice. which I will explain later on, and we call it as a repertoire, as a repository of cultural wisdom, insights, knowledge resource, which often these communities have, which is generally referred to as funds of knowledge. So children coming, particularly those who are in economically active areas and in those settlements, have these kinds of knowledge systems. And therefore, one can actually claim that as part of this knowledge system, they are familiar with what we call as out of school knowledge system, out of school mathematical knowledge, and so on. All right. So what I'm trying to now frame is, now this out of school mathematical knowledge system has similarities as well as differences with school mathematics, and that is well known. That is well known that uh, researchers such as, in fact, my work just a couple of years, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there is a framework which I have created called distinction framework. It sort of distinguishes based on different characteristics what school mathematics and out of school mathematics have common features or distinctions. So that can help us to understand what I really mean by that there are hybridities as well. Not that everything is very black and white or very, very distinct. Moving to the next slide, which is slide number 5, Varsha. It starts with middle and secondary grades. Yeah, yes. So you see, it's from the available in front of the screen that children who are at the middle school level, basically middle graders and secondary graders, and often coming from these kinds of backgrounds, which is a a large number actually. Um, they often have work related experience, and particularly those kinds of work which are embedded in micro enterprise, in the informal sector. We call them with different names: informal sector, unskilled sectors, and so on and so forth. But then so many of these may not be actually unskilled. They may not be trained officially in the universities in the formal space, but they are trained by through their generations, by passing on this knowledge of funds of knowledge and the knowledge transfer that keeps happening. So, exposure to such diverse work practices and work contexts give rise to different kinds of out of school knowledge practices, including measurement knowledge or measurement related knowledge, which may be actually different from what is actually taught in school mathematics as part of school measurement learning. Now, measurement knowledge acquired through these kinds of participations in work contexts, in cultural practices, have diversity of uh, modes, units, and methods. So that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about today. And then I argue, and you will, I think you'll be convinced that these definitely have linkages and implications for school math learning. Next slide. Now, measurement as a school topic integrates with topic across mathematics. If we talk about mathematics as a school subject, it also builds concepts and skills. And then there are other subject matters such as sciences and also social sciences where measurement knowledge is used. And then it integrates it. This is also a way in which school learning and out of school learning can integrate, can come together. The connection can be built. Next slide. Now, the question is, why do we even need to talk about it? So, basically, so what? We know about it, we know about all these. So, what is it that we are really trying to focus on? Next slide. So, I'm really interested in characterizing measurement knowledge in out of school context through these three lenses: significance, characteristics, implications. Next slide. So about the significance I have already spoken about, and then there are past research, which also talk about significance and tries to theorize. We can see that in Piagetian and post-Piagetian research studies, say till about 90s, early 2000s, have highlighted the following concepts, like the concepts of conservation. That the measurement is related to the idea of conservation. The unit, once fixed, is fixed. It doesn't change, from place to place. Or in an object that you wish to measure or use your knowledge for using it as a template in some work is understood to be having this property of conservation. Transitivity. A is bigger than B, B is bigger than C. Naturally, A is bigger than C. Such kind of ideas. Then the notion of partitioning, and then equipartitioning. So we can always partition, make folds and folds and so, but these have to be equal. All these partitions have to be equal and comparable. Is a very, very crucial idea that is often introduced at the school level without actually talking about what happens if the partitions are not equal. you know this is something which I've observed that in out of school contexts, uh, the generally the masters or the more knowledgeable others in terms of Vygotskian words are actually using and showing, demonstrating what happens if the units are, or the partitions, or the breakups, subparts, subunits are not equal. Something that we often don't use, but we assume as an underlying principle. Then the concept of displacement, concept of iterative covering, that a unit has to cover the entire object that is being measured, and the cardinality of that, is the count, is the measure after all. So these kinds of ideas, which are generally assumed, and these are available in the textbooks, not explicitly always, they may remain implicit, but these are also the ideas which you often see in out of school contexts as well. The later studies added the notions of accumulation of distance and additivity. So the distance is basically an iterative cover, and then accumulating those covers. You know, and also the role of origins on scale. There are many, many videos. One such video is very popular, created by an organization called Educational Initiatives, which worked with middle and secondary graders. And then the concept of, so say, use a broken scale and then start measuring with it. And that's where you realize that many middle, even secondary students make mistakes of where to start counting it from. So basically, the role of origin on scales and so on. Now, development of measurement ideas within research as part of work practices have come up through Jean Leve's work, like use of estimation, congruence, symmetry, proportional reasoning, optimization, visualization, which is also, I mean, these are also part of Milroy's work or Teresina's work and so on, but mostly done in the early 90s or late 80s. Even in India, we have work, similar work by L.S. Saraswati in Tamil Nadu, where she worked with the agricultural laborers, and she describes their measurement modes and units as part of their work practice. And there is a book, by those who are interested may actually look up that book, called Numeracy Counts. Numeracy Counts, written by L.S. Saraswati, Anita Rampal, and R. Ramanujan. So that's a good book which actually contains all these kinds of work in the Indian context. Next slide. Drawings from research on learning of measurement, as I just mentioned, and taking it ahead. The use of spatial visualization, that the visual or tactile use can come in very many ways, have actually come up in research through various studies like agricultural laborers. There is Brian Greene and Swapna's work on Swapna Mukhopadhyay's work on boat builders, then Alaskan basketry's work by Jerry Lipka, and similar. There are many studies which can be part of ethnomathematical study. Ethnomathematics is basically um, mathematical practices as part of community practices of well-defined cultural groups, although there are many critiques of ethnomathematics as well. But what I'm trying to draw from these studies are the examples of measurement knowledge which have emerged. So not really focusing on ethnomathematics or getting into the critique and those kinds of things there, but I'm trying to extract these ideas which have emerged in those studies. Use of proportionality and inversion techniques in construction, foam and scale drawing came up in a big way. This was, I remember there was a special issue of 2002 of our one of the leading journals in Mathd, called Journal of Research in Maths Education, JRME. So they had a special issue in 2002 where this came up. It was although quite insightful work. and then community knowledge of design and construction, which I will actually be focusing on in this presentation. Next slide. Now, opportunities and affordances for measurement knowledge, and this is actually coming, I'm trying to theorize from my work here, is that many research studies have already spoken about cumulative understanding and cumulative understanding of skills and strategies linked with measurement knowledge. And here in my work, we also document these skills and strategies. But what is even more important is the need to go beyond these actually, and then trying to make a design instruction which goes beyond these kinds of instructions basically, and support teachers with developing key concepts that have been identified elsewhere, and bring them together to the classroom. So that is to include how to construct units. It's not, see, unit is not, I mean, unit is of course important, but unit per se is okay, it's given almost. But what leads to the construction of that unit is more crucial for us to understand. And that construction also leads to equipartitioning, subunits, and then different templates that you see, which I will be coming to. So these ideas of chunking, how to chunk, what the size of those chunks be, basically construction of unit actually. When you talk about size of chunk, you are actually coming to the unit. So unitization. So those are more crucial as we feel, and both Ravi and I. And so therefore construction of these scales and then convenient tools, modes is what we think can take our classroom instruction further, and bring these ideas to the classroom. So what are these mainly? So let's go to the next slide. The school topic, I've discussed this, I can skip it. Generally, in school you discuss only about SI, the standard international unit, but in the out of school context, you'll be surprised to see that most of us are using old British units. See, for example, if you go to a store and for, say, buying eggs, generally eggs are sold in dozens, even now, you know, and there are many such, the breads are sold in pounds, then petrol is, and or the other similar fuel often are used, they use not liter but also ounce. Feet is a common concept, flat sizes and so on. The older generation will appreciate that the flat sizes, I can't even realize how much this room is in terms of square meters. I can tell you instantly in terms of square feet, although I've never studied feet, inch and so on in school. In our times as well, it was all SI. The cultural practice has remained ingrained with the old British units, or informal units, or units which have emerged from our own cultural practices and so on. School textbooks often refer to the SI units and do not actually acknowledge or draw from these out of school contexts or units used in these contexts and so on. The other difference, a point that is to be noted is, often in the school textbooks, you see the way measurement topic is dealt with is to build a skill in the sense of drawing, of actually using a scale and be able to measure, than focusing on the concepts or underlying principles of the measurement as a theory. And then there is absence of hand skills as well in the curriculum. So most of the handicrafts, that we that are part of our cultural plurality in this area, South Asia particularly, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and so on, are often not brought in the textbooks, and these knowledge remain segregated often. And therefore, what happens is some of the children who are coming to these classrooms and using these textbooks, I mean, their identities, their agency, and and their identity as a doer from that community is often not acknowledged. So, and these are, although these are valorized in the schools, in the community's funds of knowledge, these are not equally valorized in the school or in the formal academic knowledge perspective. Now, that brings me to the funds of knowledge idea, which is basically refers, as I just mentioned a few minutes ago, it's cultural insights, knowledge domain, cultural resource, which is part of the community practice, and therefore every member of the community has access to. So, This is often embedded in the networks of relationships, because in a community there may be several different enterprises happening, and people are generally interconnected, and the knowledge is interspersed in the community, in the dwellings, and therefore one sees a hybridity of cultures and practice. The fund of knowledge, so the word fund is basically used to emphasize the idea of resource that is available in the community, and also an idea of accumulation, bringing together that kind of notion. Next slide. Yeah. So, well, I'm not really focusing on the research idea. Let me go to the data. This was done in a low income. Please keep on proceeding. Let's go to slide number 19 or 20. So, this study was done in, proceed further. Further. Yeah. So, this was this kind of neighborhood in central Bombay, done more than a decade ago and 15 years ago. But the ideas are still relevant, and I'm really going to interested in showing you the data, and therefore I'm not describing what the study was about, unless there is a question later on. So these are some of the examples that you see. No, go back to that slide, that Zari work. So these are some glimpses from micro enterprises which I came across during that study in that low income settlement in central Bombay, which is economically active zone. In fact, according to some estimate then in 2010, uh, this area produced one third of entire Bombay's GDP. Can you imagine the economic output? But people living there are financially poor and often migrants, and therefore the region is multicultural, multi-religious, multilingual, you know, and also multi-ethnicity and so on. Now, these, you can see some hands there, and they are workers as well as uh, middle grade students, grade 7. In those days, grade 7 was part of, in Bombay, grade 7 and grade 8 was part of middle grade then. And what else I wanted to say here? Yeah, let's proceed. I will recollect. Yeah. So now ladder work is another um good source of out of school measurement knowledge, hmm, where you can actually get to see how templates are created, how the templates are measured, how construction of those units happen, and so on. Move on. This is a dyeing and block printing work, and the the middle grader, seventh grader, Rizwan, a pseudonym, who used this, had actually a very good motor skill to tell you to predict uh, measurement of, say, length measure of any object that you show. So you just show any object, and he will say in inches that this is 5 inches or 5.5, साढ़े सात इंच का है, all that. So this kind of dyeing blocks was part of his work for block printing. And recently, one of I want to go to the next slide. One of my master's students who just finished his master's this year, is going to be graduated soon. He worked on a similar topic on measurement, out of school measurement knowledge in Rajwar community in Haryana and Rajasthan, primarily Rajasthan, and the group has moved to Haryana as well. Harsh Gadgil is his name. So Harsh's work also documents, and this is what I have taken from his work with his permission. Uh, so he has documented that there is a use of geometrical knowledge and a sense of aesthetics, and they, the community members, the workers, are quite particular about aesthetics and the line of symmetry, the axis, optimization of resources, how to cut the leather in given design so as to have less wastage, you know that kind of ideas, which are very common, in very other societies also have it, but then this is very important that we document these, and then there are different kinds of conversion units. What you see here is the juti making, the traditional juti footwear making, and then you see how the ideas of symmetry, the mirror symmetry, and then when you fold them, symmetry through an axis, all those are visible here. Next slide. Again, from Harsh's work, this is an example where center points and stability are being measured and being designed using freehand drawings. So this is the latest work, in fact, just last 6 months, and so this also document that the practices have remained almost similar, and different practices. My work from Bombay or Harsh's work from Rajasthan and Haryana bring ideas together and similar ideas together, which we spoke about: equipartitioning, construction of units, template, and accumulation of units, iteration, covering. All these ideas are together. Let's move on. Now, if we try to document these ideas and put them together, so this is what we get, that these ideas are based on mathematical principles underlying measurement experiences, which may remain hidden, but the mathematical principles are common. There could be different forms in which these are represented. And some of these contexts are quite familiar to us. And these are part of everyday measurement context, but quite scientifically done, quite akin with the scientific measurement that we are generally familiar with or use. Therefore, these domains have potentially very strong resource for building connections between formal classroom mathematics and after out of school experience. Move on. Now, then there are curricular disconnections as well, which we explained earlier. So let's move on, please. Now, archaeology. Ravi and I tend to call this archaeology because we feel that with the advent of machines and advent of different kinds of um, other support system around us, or mostly with machines and so on, have de-skilled us. But and therefore what has happened is we do not no longer actually need use of the mathematical ideas, which the machines can. For example, how many of us, even if we are paying, say, EMIs and so on for loans and so on, how many of us actually look at the tables, how those interests are calculated? you know most often these are calculated by actuaries by taking into account various kinds of modelings, probabilistic or stochastic modelings, and then those tables, we don't even bother, we just rely. So our skill of being able to mathematize has stopped. So in a way we claim that our society is becoming more and more demathematized. Demathematized. The need for mathematical knowledge for our everyday life settings has actually decreased, and we have become de-skilled. And in fact, you'll see in many Western countries, they do not actually need their children to work out arithmetical operations, saying that, well, the calculators are there for them to do. Why do we teach them multiplication and division? I've encountered this in the US. I've encountered this in South Africa, in Norway, in England. I think partially in Sweden also. Okay, so when we say archaeology, we are actually claiming that these out of school practices are arresting this onslaught of demathematization. And on one hand, on the other hand, there are enough knowledge resource and systems available in our community which actually call, or in fact which actually ask for uncovering and unpacking these ideas, embedded ideas, which are often mathematical in nature, but also other ideas are there. There are many. There is a group which is very interested in working on Jan Vigyan, people science. The ideas of science which are embedded. But now I'm just focusing on mathematics, and therefore this. So we are interested in archaeology of measurement knowledge, how to bring that up, and where mathematical notions and ideas can be uncovered, unpacked, which remain in terms of embedded in terms of tools and artifacts. and and textbooks can actually do a good job by including these ideas explicitly in their domains. Next slide. Now, as a pedagogical mode, archaeology can also be used to let children inquire and unpack the sedimented constructions which are underlying, which may remain very opaque, at the surface level, but we need to unpack them. Measurement processes, tools, units are often opaque, the constructions underlying them need to be unpacked, and this the opacity of underlying constructions can be understood, as I just explained, the perspective of demathematization, because then you are not actually you are arresting you are like doing d of demathematization, in a way you're trying to mathematize by involving mathematical principles and connecting these with the broader socio-cultural historical considerations, basically drawing from Vygotskian perspective. Next slide. So in terms of theorization, I will this is a framework that I'm using. So I will give you examples of each of these: comparison, estimation, construction of units, templates, iteration, equipartitioning, everyday and rough quantification, chunking, multiplicative correspondence, and so on, from the examples that we had. Move on. Now, from the comparison and estimation modes, we have direct comparison of attributes, but we also have indirect comparison and comparison against a template. And then there is something called close fit comparison, the best fit, where one actually gets to see one-one correspondence, so one-to-one correspondence using comparison, one-to-many comparisons, one-to-many correspondence, and then estimation based on calculation. So we see that each of these could be observed either in the Zari work or in the leather making work, where leather making was done to make wallets, bags, different kinds of bags, belts, and so on. And then you had the example of juti making as well, and block printing. So each of these, there are direct comparisons, there are indirect comparisons as well, like using a second degree comparison. So a template, then a bag is already made, and then you are using it as a template, and so on, and then directly come with a template, or using a hand drawing and sketch and then using that, and so on. Next, using a construction and use of templates, we also saw that construction of templates are largely used, but then these are made by often experts in the group, generally a senior member of the community. And in Harsh's work, you saw that person drawing, using basic freehand drawing using a pencil. Often, sometimes in fact, they use a thread or a scale, but often by just seeing a design and trying to copy. Well, nowadays we have machines to do it for us. We have photocopying machines, we have computer graphics to make designs for us. But then these practices, as Harsh mentions, and as I also saw in my work earlier, there is no use of machines yet. They rely on their own hand skills and own visual cues and acumen. So the templates are then created and used for comparison. They're also used for measuring out from template to unit and unit to template. Now this is a very interesting idea, where you have linear measure, often linear, just one dimensional. Now the templates are generally two dimensional. Sometimes when Harsh mentions that he also saw templates which are three dimensions. Now usually in two dimensional templates, like say template of a wallet, men's wallet, like a squarish thing, that can actually be used as a linear measure and also as an area measure when you're trying to cover. So it's vice versa. Whenever, depending on what kind of task you are handling, these ideas can be used. Templates for construction, when you are trying to make multi-dimensional templates, like in Harsh's work in juti making, particularly making of the sole, or the when there is little stuff inside the underneath the shoe, where you're actually using the third dimension of height as well. That's when you are using templates for construction with multiple multi-dimensional ideas. Now one can imagine, are templates really a basis or a foundation of embodied knowledge? Is measurement knowledge embodied in the template making? For us, yes, because look at the freehand drawing, or look at the use of symmetry and ideas which Hirsch's work indicates. It tells you, or even Viswan's work in block printing, that there is an embodied system of measurement, of seeing and imagining, basically approximating, estimating the possible range, and then you use a similar, say, block or a similar template which can fit in. And therefore, that best fit idea comes in, which is also connected with the idea of lessening, the wastage, basically optimization. You know, so these are all connected concepts. Next slide, please. Now, example of template in measurement, I just give you, they are generally called as firma, wallet firma or a shirt firma, shirt pocket firma, collar firma are quite common. Next. Now, template versus formal quantified artifacts. Now, one of the formal quantified artifact is a ruler, the scale that we often use. Now, construction of these convenient units or templates often are conceptually rich, and they involve partitioning, like our ruler which we use in the academic context in schools is always, the partitions are given, and then not just the partition but also in smaller units. If these are in, say, if you use a centimeter scale, not just the centimeters which are given, but within them the millimeters are also given, isn't it? And then block of millimeters, say 5 millimeters together, then there is a line which is a half a unit, basically half a centimeter, then 2 centimeters, and so like that. So these standard units and quantification are achieved through these kinds of units. So school learning of measurement is fully quantified, but that quantification often remains opaque in the sense that children are able to do, but they do not know why they are doing and what is it that is happening which leads them to the answer. But this opaqueness also remains, depends largely on the artifacts. Now, one of the tasks that I can think of right now, I wish I had more time. Generally I can do this in a workshop mode, not in a lecture, but then it's a good example to think. Suppose you go to a faraway land, कहीं चले जाते हो summer vacation में, and then you have no access to telephone. नहीं, probably telephone का access है, say landline, no smartphone and so on, and then the task is to measure anything and describe what you have measured to your friend over the telephone. कैसे करोगे? And no formal unit is allowed. आपके पास ना तो scale है, नहीं कुछ भी नहीं है. So all, so how will you do it? And what is it that you are going to communicate to your friend? Because remember, when you are communicating, your friend should also realize what you're saying. So you can't be saying, well, मैंने एक धागा ले लिया. उस धागे की लंबाई क्या थी? क्या वो धागा वही धागा जो मैंने भी यूज किया? उतनी मोटाई, उतनी पतलाई, इस तरह की चीजें. So what is it that remains common? What is it that you're going to communicate? We did that example in the classroom. Think about it. Abhi turant, you don't have to answer it right away, but it's not a straightforward reply. Our students, 7th graders, struggle with it. And actually, some of them said, well, I will be using a scale. Then others said, no, scale is not allowed. Sir ne to mana kiya hai. You cannot use the normal scale. Then they said, well, haath. They were discussing around, and others were countering. Arey, tera haath mere haath se ka barabar thodi na hoga. How will I know what hand length you have, hand span you have? So they were only came. Later on, we struggled with, I think, 2 days, 2 lessons. This was a vacation camp that we were conducting in the same school where we did the data collection, and so the children were coming from same locality with an exposure to various work practices. Finally, one of the girls, she came up with a good example. She said, well, we will use हमारी रियाजी की किताब यूज, मैथमेटिक्स उर्दू मीडियम स्कूल था, सो रियाजी की किताब यूज करेंगे. एंड देन शी सेड, वेल, हम क्योंकि हमारी किताबों की लेंथ तो बराबर है, सो वी विल यूज द सेम दिस ये लंबाई. तो फिर आई सजेस्टेड, रवि सजेस्टेड दैट मे बी चौड़ाई विल बी बेटर. एंड देन सो द पॉइंट इज दिस आइडिया ऑफ a unit which also works for my community, my friend, my colleague. So something that others can also make sense of. Now that depends on the artifact. Why it works in the school context is we are using a scale which is say a meter long or 12 centimeters long and so on, a fixed unit, same unit which is in India as well as in France, Australia, Brazil, everywhere. But should I use a similar unit and say, well, I will use my notebook's length as my unit? May not work because my unit may be different from your unit. But then in that classroom, for them, mathematics textbook all had similar length, so therefore it worked. The idea is, look at the underlying idea. What worked? I mean, there's nothing sacrosanct with the book or that length. What worked was that choice of unit, which once chosen is fixed and which is also understood by your colleague, your partner, your co-worker. So that's the idea with which often these templates and out of school practices work with, which often remain very opaque in our school culture because that is given. We are never asking our students in the formal classroom space to create a unit for them and so that it makes sense to others. Move on, please. Now, rubrics for archaeology, comparison with the same units, same framework, and then diversity of objects, measurement modes, units, and instruments. Move on. Here I've given some examples of how measurement can also lead to comparison, estimation, quantification, and construction. Something that I have already described. Yeah, move on. And similarly, diversity of objects. We noticed that there are different kinds of unary dimension objects as well as multiple dimension objects, like that pharma for leather for wallet making, leather wallet making, came in a squarish size, 4-inch by 4-inch. All right, so that is used as, and it has a name. It's called desi, and the desi is used as a template, both as an area measure for length measure. Then there are different weight measures such as mutti. Mutti is something which we also use. You know, one mutti is also like one chatak, 1/6 of a what is that called? Not seir, but the other unit. I'm forgetting the word actually. So actually, in one seir of milk, in 1 kilogram of milk nowadays, you put one chatak of rice to make good kheer. Is a template which my grandmother told me. And actually it works. So if you are actually condensing the milk a lot, by stirring it and boiling it again, and making it condensed, and then one chatak of rice actually makes a very tasty kheer. Uh, in fact, so these kinds of ideas are very common in our household practices. Zari sequence, the beads that you're using, decorative sequence, they are often used in terms of mutti. Then in milk, we still use kilo and seir. Particularly in rural areas, 1 kilo doodh is very common. We don't say liter, and so on. Similarly, kilo of adhesive, and so on, in recycling work and so on. And there are many non-standard units as well, like different convenient markers using stones. You go to a street side vendor, often for 100 gram, they may not have the standard measuring unit. They may just keep a stone piece, well marked, and so on, and use as a non-standard unit. Next. And then there are different measuring instruments for weight measure, for length measure, for volume measure, and so on, which you often see in both in school practices as well as in common community practices. Next. Different measurement modes, like use of template is one mode, then use of ordinal numbers is another mode, where, for example, have you ever noticed, the dresses that we wear have alphanumeric uh, numbers, basically, size, alphanumeric labels for size, for depicting sizes. The question is, what exactly do they depict? For example, if I say that, well, this T-shirt is, I don't know I think it's called XL. It's XL, I think. This one, larger than my size. XL. So what does that XL actually mean? What does it signify? So these numbers or symbols are generally used, but often we do not know what they are signifying. सोचिए कभी, just think what they signify. And then shoe numbers and so on. Even for weight measures, there are different measuring threads in bulk, not in length, for weighing measure. So essay, they will put a stick and then see, and that is the measure of the volume or weight. Next. And using optimization skills basically to ensure minimum wastage and also to estimate resource and maximizing use of resource, which often is used and is observed. Next. And then there are old British system of units like pound, like foot and inch, like gross, ream, the ream of paper that we even now we use. Next. Then in this got, I think no, go ahead. I think it's a mistake. It got repeated. No, go. 44, I think. Go up. This. So even British units as acres, square feet. No, Varsha. You were correct. Here. Slide 45. Yeah. Square feet are popularly used for land measurement, as I just mentioned. Units such as ounce and gallons, which continue to be used for volume measurement, and square feet, as I just mentioned, for area measurement, floor size measurement, and so on. Next. There are other systems of measurement, systems of measuring units, like the metric system or the indigenous ones, which are even more interesting, like the desi or var or gaj, in Hindi for a yard, or traditional units like kattha, bigha, and so on for land measures are often used even now. And we try to convert to formal SI units, but often these make more sense than other formal systematized units. Next. And then there are informal units like lari, like mutti, a fistful, a cubit, arm length. 12 हाथ की साड़ी is a standard length of a sari. 12 हाथ की साड़ी. हम हमेशा बोलचाल की में कहते भी हैं. Cutting tea is a commonly used beverage in Bombay where, a tea, a cup tea, can be cut into various sizes. And I've heard people saying 3 by 7. So 3 cups of tea distribute among 7 people. 3 by 7. So cutting tea. एक कटिंग टी दे दो 3/7 ऐसे, एक कटिंग टी दे दो 2/3 ऐसे. So these are very very commonly used registers, often like repertoires. These are words like the next example that you see, ha, adha pav, pauna, sawa, dare, and so on. So pauna is a very interesting word because in English you say 3/4, but we don't say teen pav. We can say teen pav, but pauna is teen pav. Now, what is pauna? It's pav una. So una is subtraction. So when you subtract 1 pav from the whole, that is 1/4 from 1, you get 3/4. So that is pauna. Isn't it interesting? So these are all the semantic use of these words, but we do not know where these words are coming from. So that kind of archaeological excavation is also required. Move to the next. Here's a summary of what I have just mentioned in terms of various work practices which I've documented, but I'm going to actually give you a very interesting, and that's where I'm going to stop, an example of old textbooks from 1893, and move to the next. Yeah, this is the framework which I've created, basically summarizing all this. From history, if you see textbooks from 19th or 20th, early 20th century, measurement was very, very central to school mathematics textbook, in fact, arithmetic textbooks. And focus was given on building student skills and knowledge that was useful around that time in the everyday world, often economic transactions. And teaching of measurement often focused on purely computational aspects. It did not focus on practical skills of measurement or the conceptual side of it, but the application. And one such example is the next. Go to the next slide. Here. So this is taken from a mnemonic rhyme, which was part of, uh, and it's called Shubhankari. So it was part of arithmetic textbook prepared by uh, Chakravarti, J.G. Chakravarti, in 1893 in Bengal Presidency. So what is written here, those who understand Bengali, old Bengali, will follow it. So it basically gives you a primer to for memorizing, and then if you know price of one sev, which is like 1 kilo, you can find the price of one man 40 kilo 40 ser. So if one ser costs 1 taka, like 1 rupee, then naturally the mon will be 40 taka, 40 rupees. If it is one sikki is like sikka. In our terms, you can say 25 paisa, 1/4 of a rupee. Those days 64 paise became made 1 rupee, and therefore this would be uh, 16. So one sikki would be 10 because it's a quarter. Then one anna, which is a further 1/4 of a sikki, is arhai rupeya, 2.5. And then one pi, which is another quarter, then that is 10 anna. And if 1/5 of that is one gonda, then that would be 2 anna. And then 1/4 of that, one kora, is 2 pi. Now people would just remember this. So that is that poem, that rhyme. So it's short proti drobbo, যত হইবেক দর, টাকা প্রতি 40, টাকা প্রতি 40 টাকা, মন প্রতি ধর. So you see, look at the rhyme. Dor, dhor, loibe, janibe, duani, jani. So it makes remembering very easy. And if you remember this Shubhankari for calculation, this is basically calculating basically conversion between ser and mon. There are similar primers for land measurement, similar primer for volume measurement like milk and other liquid, oil, and so on. So those were used, and this were taught in grade 4. And often if someone is fourth, you will see this written in Bankim Chandra's Upanyas, even Sharad Chandra's Upanyas, and so on, that person was only fourth pass, but he knew Shubhankari. So Shubhankari was like a way of life. So if you knew Shubhankari, you are going to have no problem in doing any economic transactions whatsoever. But these kinds of ideas, I'm not eulogizing these, but what I'm trying to draw here is, look at these probably have a very valuable pedagogical ideas embedded in them, and which we are not. See, rote learning is problematic, but sometimes such rote learning in terms of rhyming like these often give you instant knowledge practice, which is also crucial and practiced by cultural community. I mean cultural part of cultural practices can't be denounced altogether. So that was it. Here is the example given, the reference given at the bottom. You can actually get it in the National Archives in Calcutta and available online as well. Here is the description which I just described. Okay, this is not published yet. I'm actually writing a paper on it, so be careful. Yeah, so this is measurement modes from the past. In fact, you get similar ideas from Bombay Presidency as well. Textbooks written by Gopal Krishna Gandhi you know actually give similar examples. All right, move on please, and I'm closing. So moving ahead, one thing is archaeology as a principle to bring out more hidden, implicit, and crystallized form of measurement knowledge, and the other one is to work more and understand more how demathematization works and how these cultural practices are arresting that process of demathematization. Next. I think this is what we have described already, that culture, the curriculum need to take into account measurement learning, which needs to focus on conceptual understanding, not just on skill building. Then second is focus more on unifying principles of measurement, which are explicitly connected with our everyday practices, and then therefore the diversity of measurement related practices can be eliminated. And thirdly, quantification is achieved in different ways for different attributes and purposes. That needs to be focused. Next. And then for the implications for the school curriculum are basically the same, archaeology and processes of construction, basically moving towards conceptualization. So here I'll stop with some references at the end, and you can always write to me for more references. These are only selected references. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Arindam. I realized that we should have given more time to you. But then when, others ask questions, you can elaborate.
Yes.
Yeah, you needed more time to describe a couple of things.
Yeah.
Just one tiny query before I open it to others. Um, did you record the conversation, uh, where we were talking about how a kind of comparative, perspective a child was getting on measurement, and at what point they appreciate the invariant principle, like this is, or they also understand that yes, it's a very, very working phenomenon here, but not a very shared, artifact when I talk about others. I mean, with the larger community. I mean, what is the process of, coming to realize that, and how? Um, I mean, did you? I mean, at any point record the conversations? Yeah.
No,
Okay.
no, because when I was visiting, see, I did this study over 3 years, actually
Yeah.
visiting the community almost every day for
Yeah.
close to 3 years. And initially, the idea was to build
Mm.
a rapport, and because it was ethnography in a way, although I didn't live there and become a member of the community, I used
Mm.
to come back to my institute in the evenings. But because the prolonged exposure and visits helped me to build a relationship with them. And
Mm.
then often some of these ideas would not just come like this, these would
Mm.
come by just sitting through and observing and talking to them and asking questions, or just sitting. They're
Mm.
doing their work, I'm just sitting and
Mm.
watching.
Mm. Mm.
And in those contexts, recording would not have worked. Because
Also, that kind of question I'm asking is more school-like. So
Mhm.
when you use those to intervene in a classroom, probably one would
That
have,
was recorded. That was recorded.
yeah. So
So that
that's
vacation camp was video recorded.
mm,
And in fact, my conversation with Rizwan later on, because I
mm,
chose a few of them to work in depth as case study,
uh,
those case studies are recorded, audio
uh,
recorded.
uh. Um, okay, just I'm tempted, it's really a very good talk. So I'm asking you, the question. I'll not come between the audience and you after this. Um, uh, uh, when you use the term demathematization, I get the essence, like the in the community, like when you were talking about, rote memorization, and it appears as if we are trying to give mathematical, concepts or understanding through a very rote memorization process, which is very counterintuitive to mathematics itself, the way we engage with mathematical concepts. But then that has worked. And I have seen, I tell you, I had, this was long back when I was working in UK. What I realized that, in India, students were asked, they were grilled, like they were given several mathematical questions to solve, similar questions to solve again and again, so that they, stay with it and they figure out what is happening. They basically they perfect the solution, the process, and then arrive at the right kind of solution. And so, in other words, they engage in very routine kind of work, not too much of deconstruction or discussion involved in that. But then at a later stage, some of them do very well in mathematics. So we were discussing, I remember that was 2009, and we were discussing that, okay, like when somebody is forced to stay with mathematics, how long, you do it without understanding. And also the, like many other, cognition around you, meaning making processes around us, also scaffold. So at one point, we crack. why this is happening. And when we do several such problems, we also crack several principles in the process. And then some, not all, some who, go through this stage, this phase, do well in mathematics, and some of them also stay with mathematics for in higher classes, And so rote memorization or all these very mundane practices work in strange way in our kind of societies,
Mhm.
And uh, yeah, so when you were talking about that, I was thinking, yes,
Can
uh,
I come in, Minati?
yeah, Huma, please. Just 1 minute. So when you were talking about this mathematics book, which introduced through rhymes, it was actually a cognitive uh, tool to
Yes.
get children stay with a certain kind of mathematical facts and then gradually discover on their own, okay, what's happening. So I realized that it's not very far different from the way even we engage with mathematics in our everyday homes in India, even today. Brilliant, Arindam. Now let's open it to others. Huma wants to ask questions. So Huma, please.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead and
Okay,
ask.
thanks a lot. Thank you. Uh, so first of all, thanks a lot for a very good presentation and something which I always had jitters in the subject, and that's called maths. It was good to hear that some people in the world are so comfortable about it, that they're doing these kind of researches. So excellent job. Now, as Dr. Arindam, you are aware that UNESCO is now developing ISOER 2025, and the focus of our last consultation, I'm not going too much in extension of what we are doing, but bringing it down to our previous consultation, which was on FLN. So foundational literacy and numeracy we were talking about, but the focus was more on literacy last time, but not too much on numeracy. So I would like to hear from you with these kind of encounters and the project which you are doing. What is it in the context of mother tongue based education and multilingualism that you may have experienced? If not, of course, there's no need to respond to. But if you think that there is that element and dimension, and that has an impact in terms of economic empowerment, in terms of economic participation rates, and also in the context of gender, as I think Minati already wrote, that this is also like empowerment, economic empowerment, and gender empowerment. All of these are things which we are looking at. So, what would be your take on through this particular project? And if there is, I would like to hear from you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Huma. So, well, this will have another lecture to answer to that question, because there's a plenty and plenty to talk about. But making it a little shorter, just to focus on, multilingualism and mother tongue and use of these ideas to understand numeracy and how numeracy is practiced in everyday context. Let me give you this example, which is very very interesting, and there are many such examples. So, um, say the question was this in हिंदी उर्दू 12 लड्डुओं की कीमत 42 रुपए तो 15 लड्डुओं की कीमत कितनी होगी if 12 laddus cost 42 rupees how much would 15 laddus cost now and it was given in the class and the idea was how they used their idea of numeracy words making sense of registers and so on and those who were faring better in the class, like scoring well in mathematics, were the ones who tried to find value of one laddu and got stuck because there were decimals. If you divide 42 by 12, you don't get it's not a complete divisor, perfect divisor, so you get decimals. You got stuck. Those students who are generally not scoring well or are generally written off by teachers That happens in the classrooms, and no, not doing well and so on. So they were the ones, and when I was taking individual, discussions with them, they were the ones that said, and that's where the register is coming. So first of all, they noticed that it's only price of 3 laddus that was to be found out, not 15. It's only 3 because 12 का तो दिया हुआ है और 3 12 का पाव है. Now the word pav is part of their everyday register, everyday language, may not be part of their mother tongue, may not be part of their L1. It's a language that I say I have used in my word language of practice. So pav is a language of practice, a register in the language of practice. Now, once they noticed that it was pav, instantly they thought, well, the price would be pav of 42. And the pav of 42 is, it's आधा का आधा. So they said 42 का आधा 21, 21 का आधा 11, not 10.5. That is also interesting. 10.5 इसलिए नहीं, because they said दुकानदार आठाना नहीं छोड़ता sir. So therefore it can't be 10.5, it has to be 11, and therefore 42 plus 11, 53. Now the approach which was used to get to the answer is actually understanding the relation, the mathematical relationship between structures through their mother tongue. I mean, maybe language of practice, POW. Now, this is precisely what a mathematics educator would aim to do, a curriculum developer aims to do, is to build a conceptual understanding of mathematical structures and how the relationships function. And here, 3 is a unit. You see how misconceptions also work. We always think ekik niyam, unitary method means go to 1. ऐसा नहीं है. It's finding the convenient unit which can help you solve. So here the convenient unit is 3, and here you see the child did not use the word ikai, which is very, very I would say academic word, generally not used in everyday language. Instead of that, he said teen. So 12 का what was that? 12 का पाव 3, 42 का पाव आधे का आधा. So this आधे का आधा पाव is part of everyday register, which we often see. Similarly, to answer to the other part of your question, you see, many of these practices are part of their funds of knowledge, their community practice. And it's not that children are not familiar with school concepts. I mean, see, the cohort with which I worked with actually were school-going children who were working after their school hours in their community-based practices. So they had a hybridity of both the kinds of school mathematics or school knowledge, school register, as well as informal, academic, non-academic, everyday register, community register. Now, the way they were using them is very interesting. And that is what needs to be documented. And because this is where one can find resources to connect with school learning. So for me, this kind of a project is important. To come back to your question on numeracy, the way we look at numeracy I'm sorry to give you this critique, Dr. Huma, but I think we are looking at a very, very narrow domain of numeracy when we talk about FLN in the present context, be it NEP, be it in any textbooks. Because for our children, children in the community practice, numeracy has a broader sense, which also involves construction of the number. Otherwise, you tell me, many of the reports, including ASA report, will tell you what our children do not know. So we lament by saying our 5th grader, our 7th grader cannot write a 5-digit number. But have we ever checked if the child is able to give you that amount, which is equivalent to that number from a given box of money? So a child may not be able to write 13,206, 13206. But if you give a box of money and currency, the child, I'm sure, will be able to take out 13,206 in various denominations, which means the child not only knows the construction of number, child has a better grip of numeracy, which is not reflected in the way the formal expression, decimal expression, expects us to write, which is very, very alien actually. It's encoding, because here it's 1 is not 1, it's 1, it's 10,000. 3 is not 3, it's 3,000. How would that little child even know? We don't even describe this. And then we are expecting that our children should be able to read and write and understand 5-digit numbers and operate with them. So this is a very, very narrow way of looking at FLN. I'm sorry to
Also,
say. Yeah, but
sorry.
Dr. Huma, we can talk about it later
Also
on.
emphasizing the
Thank
written,
you.
templates.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, bringing place value very quickly to even counting.
Yes. Yeah.
And it can come late. It doesn't have to come so early.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Next,
if you have any recommendations, kindly share with us later, not now.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of works. Also,
Kishore has a question.
there is, Arindam knows this. There's also a cognitive reason behind why we use one for, say, 1,000 or 300 or 3, that economizes, When we operate with oral system, there is always a burden on our memory. So communities have historically evolved with units which are generally big, but we just treat them as one and then look at multiples of that, and economize our counting or measurement. But yes, these things don't have a place in our classroom. That's brilliantly brought out by Arindam. Yeah,
next
next question.
next in line is Kishore Darak sir. Sir, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Also, if there are
Hi, Arindam.
Hi.
Thank you so much for this such an engaging presentation. See, I just was wondering about the term archaeology that you've used, and particularly when these practices are so alive and so everyday practices. Uh, what is the sense in which you're using it as archaeology of these practices? Because that gives me a sense of something which is past or something which is historical. And the term archaeology, otherwise, I mean, I really want to understand the meaning. But I also wanted to understand if you're looking at the role of the state, the colonial as well as the Indian state, which in a way has played a strong role in making these practices archaic. So Pav and Adha and Pauna and all these are, I mean, every day when I go to market in Pune or in Ahmednagar to buy vegetables, we all use this. So it's not even a practitioner's term. It's in public. It's in everyone's usage of language. So
Everyday
it's not
language.
only the
Yeah.
seller. Yeah, it's not only the seller who is using it. It's also the buyer, and even mathematics textbooks in Marathi definitely use these terms. Okay. So not in the context of measurement necessarily, also while introducing fractions, for example. So 1/4 of a roti and a half of a roti. So these are the kind of colloquial terms that we use. So given this, and you have been talking about this for years, I know your work to some extent, at least I can say, you're talking about these practices, bringing to the classroom, and because those are alive, those are living practices. And now you're using a term archaeological. So I'm a little confused about that. Can you please
No, no,
explain?
no. I totally agree with your critique. And
Arindam, I also want, because I was intrigued by this use of the term archaeology. Definitely, you're not using the way Foucault uses, But then, how are you employing this term? It's very
Yeah.
interesting. I just want to know the same
So
thing. Yeah.
So I really want to understand the use because, and I would definitely like to read the paper that you and Ravi have written to understand it better. But if you can explain a bit about.
Sure. So, yeah. I mean, the critique is well taken. And yes, I'm not using it the way Foucault has used. See, for us, archaeology is more about unpackings, uncovering and removing the sedimentation from it. There are other words such as decrystallization, which people have used in maths education, but we chose to use archaeology also because of the historical sense, because we wanted to see how the usage has happened or evolved historically over time. So it's not just about what is embedded, how mathematics is embedded, and uncovering it and trying to make sense, but also trying to see the linkages, say through textbooks and other practices and so on. For example, uh, I mean, around that same time, 15 years ago, I came across a word called kuttak. Kuttak is the word which Aryabhat used in Aryabhatiam to describe Diophantine equations. That was the word Kuttak used. उसके बाद you don't see that word anywhere in literature, in maths literature. Bhaskara tomb के किताबों में है, but which is also historical now. And then during my work with Mushahar community in Bihar, and they use those mathematical riddles which others in the community, in the region, in the local language called Maghi. In Magahi, the word for riddle is bujhawal, bujna, suljana, bujna. So bujhawal, but they don't use bujhawal, they say kuttak. And I was so intrigued that how come Mushahar community and none of them had even reading ability or writing ability, completely non-literate. Okay, they were using kuttak. Where did it come from? And then Ravi and I.
Arindam,
yeah.
Arindam, sorry. Kuttak is a term. The derivative of that is used quite frequently in Marathi language. Kut is a kut. Kut
No, that is
which
root.
is derived from kuttak.
See, that is also used in Hindi for kut. Kut is root, finding the root of an equation and so on.
No, kut is not a root of equation. In Marathi, kut means it is a riddle or a puzzle.
I see. Okay, yeah. That I didn't know. Thanks, Kishore. Then I can connect with, because Ravi and I have been discussing this, that Kuttak is precisely used for those riddles, and these riddles are Diophantine. Similar equation. I mean, for example, say 3 variables and 2 equations, and then and then how do you use basically to describe these equations, which are indeterminate, either infinitely many solutions or no solution. Something similar happens with Diophantine. These kinds. So that's where our notion of archaeology started coming in, and then we found examples of these primers and measurement practices. We thought, what could the historical linkage may be? And that's where this word is coming from. I know it's not very well defined as of now. We have been using it, but sort of this is where it is coming from. Yeah.
In our Saura study, so a lot of concepts that Sauras used in Saura language, when we did linguistic analysis, we found, give and take between Indo-Aryan languages and Saura language, like Odia, Telugu, and Saura language. And we also had, I was telling you the other day, Bantu, where is it coming from? They use, Bantna for division, and that comes from Odia. But then Kudi, we thought it has come from Odia Bengali, but then we realized that no, it has come from Mundari to Odia and then to Saura. But this linguistic contact, situations also give rise to, these kinds of context where we find suddenly we get surprised that, okay, how come they're using this concept? But it has traveled from somewhere. And then if we dig into that historical account, the history of it, we find an answer. But yeah, it's interesting to see the archaeological work you are building. Though it's very difficult to claim that we have sufficiently done a historical analysis of, because it requires linguistic analysis, it requires analysis of knowledge, what is traveling from where, and what is getting reified mathematically in what culture, and then how it is getting reformulated or readjusted to the local context. And sometimes it also gets a new word, and so you'll find some words as intermediary to a new set of words. It's a very challenging job. It takes time. I'm happy that you have started. It's brilliant, Yeah. Let's take some more questions. And Varsa, if there are questions in the chat box,
There
can
are only comments. People have shared some comments on the lecture and units of measurement. If you have any
let's take some questions first.
If you have any questions, please unmute and ask.
Kishore, thanks for that comment. Koot Bhakt, I didn't know. So I will look up, and the magazine that you're talking about.
Yeah, there was I'll just figure out which magazine was. I used to read as a child in the 1980s. So
Okay.
I'll figure that out and let you.
Thanks.
It's in
Something
Marathi
we-
though. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have any questions, please unmute and ask. Or comments, or if you want to share something. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes,
So,
please go ahead.
yeah, thank you. Hi, Arindam. So,
Hi.
this session was really insightful. I just wanted to understand how was your experience while designing tools to actually assess the kind of way you're measuring the community-based knowledge or the funds of knowledge that we discussed, and how did you try to make it more valid and reliable? I mean, I understand that this approach makes it much more fair. This is a much more fair approach to people, making it, especially considering the kind of the population that we are considering, the out of school children or the people who are from the community, making it more fairer to them also. But what was your experience in designing tools and making them? How did you approach in making them valid and reliable?
Yeah, thank you. That was a very good question, actually. So I must give you a disclaimer first that I came from a very, very privileged condition then. I was doing my PhD in Homi Bhabha Center for Science Education, where we had all kinds of resources. So when some people actually said, Anita Rampal once told me that you are all resource spoilt with resources. So, HBCC is that kind of place. We have too many resources, too many facilities and so on. And I had that privilege of fellowship, in fact, I had it for 7 years, and I went to the field for 3 years, had a prolonged relationship with the community. And there, how the tools were created was also because in HBCC, we used to conduct summer camps and Diwali camps, vacation camps for middle graders. So some of these ideas we would bring there and use in those camps to design, design questions for seeing, basically, those sessions would be for fraction teaching, algebra teaching, or understanding language use. So using these examples to understand how they're doing proportion using fractions and so on. So there were many back and forths, and as I said, I was really privileged because I had exposure to those community members as well as these camps in HBCC. So I had a privilege of piloting these tools many times, using them with different cohorts of children, and then bringing those particular words which I knew they were using in their work context and they were familiar with, but probably they were doing differently, and telling them. So, and I was also familiar with the school mathematics curriculum, the textbook content. So that's how we prepared those. There were lots of back and forth. We did validity tests, reliability, and all that. So from research methods point of view, those concerns were taken care of. From the content, particularly content validity and preparing the content particularly, these exposures were of great use. Yeah.
Thank you, Silga, for that question. Who is the next? If anyone else has some questions or comment or want to share something, please go ahead.
You can read
Shan,
out.
yeah, Shan has raised his hand. Shan, unmute yourself, please, and ask.
Yeah, I saw Shan's comment also.
Comments, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi,
Hi.
Dr. Arindam and everyone. So, I was just sharing, not a question, but kind of reflection. Uh, that there are a lot of units, and they now shifted from their conventional use to practice of language and all. For example, at my home, my mother often taunts us कि तुम्हें रत्ती भर सहूर नहीं है, रत्ती भर काम नहीं कर पाते हो. So it's now they shifted in a lot of languages and all. And likewise, I also shared a lot of things like Balist, and Angul, and that is also used in the discourse of Prithviraj and Mahmud Ghaznavi in the history. So these are quite fascinating and now shifted from the conventional used in the language and all in today's language actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
But Shan, do you have like some access, or at least if you could tell us where we can find more such examples, historical examples?
I'm not very much sure, Dr. Arindam, but these are like I have heard in my family, and in my dadi used to say a lot of these units. Let's say this ratti used for the weighing gold and
Yeah,
all in
yeah,
the
that's
earlier
the
context, and
sola aane sahi,
balis
sola
and
takke sahi,
yeah, so take and all.
Hmm.
You extensively used in your
Yeah,
presentation. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
I would just try and capture a lot of these words and all,
Hmm.
and I'll try to connect with you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, that will be lovely. In fact, in the community, many all communities, in fact, not any particular. I come from Bihar, therefore I have more exposure from Bihar communities. But equally true in Maharashtra, Bengal, Madras, Gujarat. There are many rhymes, riddles, and which have mathematical elements in them. You know, and which are now fading away because these are all part of oral culture and not written. And therefore, those who are using, like Shan, as you mentioned, your mother, your grandmother were using, probably our generation or the next one would not have exposure to these unless these are documented. So I think one of the tasks which, and I'm looking towards some Panda now, that we must also think of ways to document these. May not be mathematically rich. There are some ideas which are rich in science, in astronomy, for example. A lot of these are just
We
fading
had
away.
documented way back in 2000, 2001, 3, when we were working with Saura children and Kui children. We documented a lot of proverbs, which actually economizes mathematical imagination. And we were documenting also mathematical and science practices in the communities. And we used the term defreezing that time. Like, like in the practice, mathematical ideas, scientific ideas are almost in frozen state.
Frozen.
They know how to solve it, they know how to do it, but they can't explain the science behind it or the mathematics behind it. So it required a kind of pedagogic intervention by us to unpack that. But in the process of unpacking, they discover the kind of mathematics these have. 2008-9, we also brought out with Julian William. We did one study where we used this defreezing as a method. We were also criticized for it. Linguists don't like defreezing word. It's like nothing is frozen. It's like, so using the word freezing and defreezing is conceptually problematic at that stage. And there are some Madhu Barnamala, Madhu Barnamala, I think, in Odia language, which was written in pre-independent time, and they actually were devising methods of introducing letters to children and how to read. And they were also using a lot of these proverbs to bring about some mathematical discussions. So, but I'll not say that those have exhausted the proverbs in Odia language, but yes, they have had documented. So I think if we start looking for, you can find. One site could be, as I was saying, all these tribal research institutes could be, and then the state archives, will in Odia certainly, Barnamala, Madhu Barnamala, yes, had couple of these, knowledge systems documented. I think all states must be having some, yeah, but one has to get into a kind of archival work. Yeah.
So if there are no questions, then we'll wind up the session today.
I just want to know one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Because, yeah, Arindam, how
Mhm.
far have you gone with this measurement work? One is like a documentation of the practice. And where, like we try to analyze many times, okay, the kind of mathematics that are embedded in those practices. And what comes across, little more clearly is, okay, what kind of mathematization the community does. But they do not necessarily get into the basic mathematical principles, which we need in classroom. So that's quite a travel, starting with these everyday experiences where, the mathematical principles are involved, but we do not deliberately um, uh, you know, talk about it or reflect on it. And we need them to come to a stage where they also are conscious of these processes, mathematical arguments or principles involved in that, which is more deliberate an exercise. One very spontaneous, hidden or frozen, whatever word you use, to a process of it becoming part of our deliberate knowledge, and also provides a kind of foundation to our further mathematical dialogue. Have you worked on this growth, like how, as pedagogue, we travel this distance, from the everyday practice to a very deliberate kind of dialogue involving mathematical principles in whatever we do or see?
No, no, no. I have not done longitudinal study. For example, even to work with the community, say
Mm,
over a decade, and then see how maybe the
yeah,
registers use have
mm,
changed
yeah.
or the practices have been impacted and so on. No, I haven't. That would have been a very, very
We
nice.
can think of
Think of
something.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, I did something, but again,
Mm,
bringing these artifacts to classroom and then
yeah.
creating a dialogue around that. So I tried with some of these methods, creating a dialogue, providing different kind of scaffolds, and scaffolds that are familiar to scaffolds that are actually not too familiar, but still, find a kind of scaffold from the everyday. But yes, we didn't do too much also in that. We did some work
Mm, mm.
long back. Yeah. That's something would be interesting to
Yeah,
try.
yeah. We'll
Yeah.
discuss then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll discuss. Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Varsa, let's see if there is any other comment or question.
Yes,
That we can
Kishore
invite
sir is
them.
asking, Kishore sir is asking if is it Madhu Barnmala or Madhu Barnabodh?
Oh, I'll have to check.
Yeah.
Madhu Barna Bodh. It could
Mm.
be Barna Bodh. It
Mhm.
could be. I'll also have to check.
Mhm.
When I was a kid, I was actually introduced to numbers and letters through that. I still
Mhm.
remember that colorful book. I mean, it's not too interesting like what we see today, like alphabets, then words, all that. But it had many those proverbs and other
Ah,
things.
okay. There's similar which is written by Vidyasagar, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar,
Uh,
in Bengali called
uh,
Borno Porichai.
Bono Purichai. And that's
Mm,
not only with
mm.
letters, it also does all
Lots of
kind of
rhymes and
things.
yeah,
Yes, yeah,
easy rhymes, very very easy.
yeah.
And he makes sure that when Sanyuktakshars are not introduced, he will
Mm.
not use any rhyme which has even one Sanyuktakshar. Or
One, yeah. So they give you stages of, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because this is a dialogue. In fact, I see my student Harsh is also here. Harsh, would you like to also add something
Mhm.
from your experience?
I'm audible.
Yes, you're
Yes, yes,
audible,
you're
Harsh.
audible.
या फर्स्ट तो मैं ये करेक्ट करूंगा कि जो सर ने नाम लिखा है कम्युनिटी का वो रेगर कम्युनिटी है नॉट राजवार कम्युनिटी
Ah, no, sorry, 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 sorry.
या
Sorry, extremely sorry. I must correct that. Oh, how
या
did I do that? Ah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
या
Raigar.
No, Raigar community, not Rajwar. Sorry, sorry.
रेगर
Rose
आज
Rag,
Guru,
Raigar.
या या
right.
In
The
Rajasthan,
blunder.
it's called Raigar. Raigar.
या या रेगर
Raigar.
कम्युनिटी
So please, Ruko, I will share the correct file. I'm so sorry. Apologies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, please go
एंड
ahead.
या और इसके अलावा जैसे मैंने जब मैं रिसर्च कर रहा था तो मैंने केवल दो टॉपिक थे ज्योमेट्री और मेजरमेंट तो जियोमेट्री को कैसे अप्लाई करते हैं मेजरमेंट के थ्रू ताकि मैक्सिमम आउटपुट आ सके ऑप्टिमाइजेशन। और साथ ही मेरे को एक और चीज़ इंटरेस्टिंग लगी जो कि कुछ ऐसे कॉन्सेप्ट वो यूज करते हैं जो लुकिंग लाइक फ्रैक्शन बट नॉट फ्रैक्शन। तो मैंने उसको एक नाम दिया था कि मिरर ऑफ एकेडमिक्स। तो एकेडमिक्स कॉन्सेप्ट की तरह दिखते हैं बट वो एकेडमिक्स नहीं है। मैंने सर के साथ भी आइडियाज तो डिस्कस किए थे कि हम जैसे न्यूमिनेटर और डिनोमिनेटर लिखते हैं कि वन वन बाई हाफ, तो वो एक फ्रैक्शन है कि एक होल का हाफ दो पार्ट इक्वल है। बट वो काउंटिंग और मेजरमेंट को एक फ्रैक्शन के रूप में लिखते हैं कि इतने साइज के इतने पैर बनाने हैं। जैसे कि वो फिंगर से मेजर करते हैं साइज को। तो फिंगर का साइज ऊपर लिखेंगे, फिर बार लिखेंगे नीचे, फिर जितना रिमेनिंग बनाना है। तो वो मेरे को थोड़ा एक यूनिक लगा कि हम जैसे हम कभी बोलते हैं ना कि एक को हम एक करके रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं, बट वो तो एक सिंबल है। उसको किसी ने और तरह से लिखा होता तो आज मतलब पूरा वर्ड उसको किसी और तरीके से देखता होगा। तो वही है कि वो भी उसी कॉन्सेप्ट को यूज कर रहे हैं, बट उनका तरीका अलग है। वो उसको कम्युनिकेशन के रूप में यूज करते हैं कि आज आपको इतना बना के देना है ना। और वो चीजें मेरे को लगा थोड़ा सा एक यूनिक। और उनकी
रिप्रेजेंटेशन।
या रिप्रेजेंटेशन। और भी काफी चीजें इसमें लेके आई, जैसे अलाइनमेंट हो गया। अपर जैसे सोल और अपर पार्ट को अलाइनमेंट करने के लिए वो पहले मिड पॉइंट फाइंड करेंगे और फिर उनको अलाइन करेंगे। और उनके जो अलाइन करने का जो थ्रेड होगा, क्योंकि सिलाई हैंड हैंड से वो सिलाई करते हैं, तो उनको थ्रेड को मेजर करने का भी उनका एक यूनिक तरीका है। जैसे 1.5 राउंड सोल के लगाएंगे तो वो उसमें इक्वल पूरा पूरा उसमें आएगा, वेस्टेज बिल्कुल भी नहीं जाएगा। और जो बीच में क्या बोलेंगे कट होगा वो भी नहीं आएगा। यो ये चीजें उसमें थी। और एक चीज और जो मेजरमेंट की बात आई तो सर ने बोला कि लीनियर जो मेजरमेंट है कि एक स्केल से वो लिक्विड जो मेजर करते हैं, तो उसमें वो मेजरमेंट के साथ और फ्रैक्शन का भी वो यूज हो रहा है कि 1 अपॉन जैसे रेशियो 1/1 का रेशियो में जो पेस्टिंग जो लिक्विड होता है उनका उनमें उतना ही वाटर ऐड करना होता है। तो अब सर्टन अमाउंट है, यदि हाफ लीटर होगा 1 लीटर होगा तो वो मेजर कर लेंगे, बट सर्टन अमाउंट लेंगे तो वो तो उसका तो कोई मेजरमेंट नहीं है ना। एक वो लेंगे और अब उनको ये करना है कि अब इसमें इतना इतना ही वाटर ऐड करना है, तो वो एक कैन लेंगे, कैन में डिप करेंगे एंड देन मेजर करेंगे कि 10 सेंटीमीटर। तो अब उतना ही वाटर मिलाएंगे ताकि वो 20 सेंटीमीटर तक आ जाए, क्योंकि जो उसका जो चौड़ाई है उसका क्या बोलेंगे जो एरिया नहीं एरिया नहीं और
डेप्थ
मतलब
बोलना चाहिए,
डेप्थ।
डेप्थ। डेप्थ।
यस। या जैसे हम एक
गहराई मतलब डेप्थ।
या क्योंकि गहराई ही केवल जो डेप्थ है वही बढ़ रही है, बाकी जो सरकमस्टेंस है उसका परिधि जो है वो
सर्कमफ्रेंस।
इक्वल है, या वो इक्वल है। तो इस वजह से वो इजी हो जाता है उनको लिए मेजर करने के लिए। अब वही हम किसी को स्कूल में, इवन मैं जब स्कूल में पढ़ा तो मेरे को भी आइडिया नहीं होता कि कोई मेरे को बोलता कि आपको इतना ही इक्वल अमाउंट में वाटर ऐड करना है, तो कैसे करूंगा, आई नो आइडिया। ये चीजें वो स्टिल वो कर रहे हैं। एंड देन और उनके कैलकुलेशन का भी चीजें हैं। जैसे सर ने मल्टी एडिशन की बात की थी, तो वो रिटर्न फॉर्म में कुछ नहीं करते। आप उनको कुछ भी बोलो, आप उनको हंड्रेड्स में थाउजेंड्स में मल्टीप्लिकेशन दे दो, वो विद इन 10 सेकेंड में करके बता दें कि ये ऐसा होता है। तो एक मेरे को अभी भी याद है कि जब मैं मेरा इनिशियल करने के लिए हमारे पास में गाँव राजेंद्र सर वहाँ गया था, तो मैं उनसे पूछ रहा था कि सर ये मतलब आप ये कैसे करते हो, आप ये करके बताओ, ये करके बताओ। तो उन्होंने बोला कि अच्छा ठीक है, तुमने हमको इतना पूछा, हमको बस तुमको केवल एक ही पूछेंगे। तो उन्होंने मेरे को एक जस्ट रिडल दिया कि 125 मन की चांदी, 250 मन सूत, 2.5 ग्राम की पगड़ी, कितनी बार बांधी। उनका कहने का जस्ट सिंपल था कि आपके पास इतना चांदी है और इतना सूत है मतलब कॉटन, उनसे पगड़ियां बनाने मतलब क्राउन जो सर पे पहनते हैं, ईच क्राउन जो होगा वो 250 ग्राम का होगा। एंड देन कि आप कितने सर पे बांध सकते हो उनको। तो मैं कंफ्यूज हो गया कि मन और जो मन जो है वो कैसे काउंट करूंगा। तो मैंने उनसे पूछा था कि आप ही बता दो कितने होते हैं। दे इनिशियली सेड दैट कि 36,000। मैं जब वापस आया घर पे बैठा, मेरे को आधा घंटा लगा कैलकुलेट करने में, यूनिट ट्रांजिट करने में, क्योंकि जो मन है वो ग्राम में कन्वर्ट करना सीधा। तो मैं कैलकुलेट किया तो सरप्राइज की 36,000 ही आंसर आया उसका। तो वो जो हमारी इंडियन जो हम जो ट्रेडिशनल यूनिट जो को हम काउंट, मन को स्टैंडर्ड यूनिट में कन्वर्ट करना, और उसकी भी स्मॉलेस्ट यूनिट में किलोग्राम का भी ग्राम में जाना, तो वो कर लेते हैं इजीली। बट उनको लिखना इतना नहीं आता, बट ओरली वो इजीली
It's
कर
oral
लेते
part.
हैं। या
Thank you, Harsh, for
या
that input. I'm very sorry. I apologize for the wrong use of the name of the community. We'll correct it.
Yeah. Anyone
Ask,
else?
what are you doing now? I think we should interact a little more. Yeah.
Me.
What are you
Ah,
doing, Harsh?
Right now I am doing job as a state coordinator in Rajasthan district. So basically हमारा जो वर्क है वो जो गर्ल्स, एडोलसेंस गर्ल्स हैं जिनकी एज 12 से 18 साल है, या फिर जो 8, 9, 10th में जो पढ़ती हैं, उनके ऊपर हम काम कर रहे हैं। जिनके जो ड्रॉप आउट रेट्स है, या उनके जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल राइट्स हैं, उनको इंग्लिश में प्रॉब्लम आ रही है, तो जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन उनके मॉड्यूल्स हैं वो अभी हमें इम्प्लीमेंट करने हैं। तो इनिशियल हम डाटा कलेक्शन कर रहे हैं कि स्टार्टिंग अभी जो बालोतरा डिस्ट्रिक्ट है, अभी बाड़मेर से जो अलग हुआ है वही डिस्ट्रिक्ट हम कवर कर रहे हैं, और चूरू में भी हमारा वर्क चल रहा है।
आप
तो
एजुकेट गर्ल्स
will,
में है क्या?
ah,
नोट, मैंने एमए एजुकेशन किया है, बट अभी जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नहीं है।
ऑर्गेनाइजेशन?
ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नेम तासी चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट, अभी न्यू ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, ये अभी स्टार्ट
that's
हुआ है।
okay. That's okay.
या
I thought, we can
Okay.
get you more on
Yeah.
board for this dialogue and everyday mathematics. Yeah.
Yeah, he just finished. In fact, he got
Yeah.
into job just 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
So
Oh,
the results are not yet out. So yeah, he's
ah.
finishing.
एंड
nice.
और भी मेरे को अभी एथनो मैथमेटिक्स जो मेरा टॉपिक है उस पर अभी भी मैं काम कर रहा हूँ। तो
Ah,
सर से डिस्कस कर रहे हैं कि कैसे मैं इसको पब्लिश करूँ, तो सर बता रहे हैं अभी, फिर मेरे को पब्लिश करना है ये वर्क
that
मेरा।
is wonderful. We'll interact
या
more with you through
या
Arindam, of course.
यस।
And so, any other question or comments? Shall we then wind up?
Okay.
Varsa, you can wind up the session.
On behalf of all the audience in this meeting session, I want to thank Dr. Arindam Bose for enlightening us today with so many amazing resources, such an amazing insights on this topic out of school measurement knowledge. Um, and I also want to thank the audience for joining us today and who have stayed with us for 2 hours and listened to us with so much intent and so much attention. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Menati ma'am. We'll meet
Thank
in
you.
the next session.
Arindam, I enjoyed listening to you.
Amazing.
It was
Thank you.
wonderful. I mean, straight in our area, in the sense that we teach, we do, and we debate some. And when you brought Piaget on board, I was really, like I teach Piaget, and I was really loving it.
Yeah,
Like
those
the
tasks
way.
of conservation,
Yeah,
I
you didn't
teach
find. I mean,
fundamental.
this is so lesser time. You're right. We need a workshop kind of thing, where you can get into more details, yeah.
Mm.
Chalo, we'll get you anyway more on board. We'll have this on for some
Yeah.
time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, audience. Thank you, Harsh. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Harsh, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.